You are listening to a Raptors podcast, the place every week for all things Raptors. Get ready and never underestimate the heart of a champion. Welcome back to a Raptors podcast. I am your host, as always, Lucky Roberts. And today, after a 2-1 week, a pretty good week, I'm going to be talking a little, droll because the Raptors lost to the Celtics today, 117-94. It was a bad performance throughout. They were losing basically from the get-go. Stayed with it through the first quarter, but after that, just slowly bled points every single quarter and ended up with a loss. And, we're not expecting to beat the Celtics, especially the Celtics at home, who are 4-0 at home, 7-2 on the year. So I'm not really too disappointed in how the Raptors played. But that being said, I would have liked to see the Raptors sort of stay in it more. 117-94, a 30-point loss essentially is not really what you would like to see from this Raptors team, especially, looking at two players have been so huge for us this season, Scottie Barnes and OG and Anunoby, with negative 28s and negative 26s on the score sheet. It's just nothing you want to see. Scottie Barnes himself, his worst game by far this season, his first poor game, he was 4 for 15, 2 for 9 from 3. He was really chucking. He had more threes than OG did this game. And he ended up, negative 28, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. So a steal, a block, he's going to get a steal, a block a game no matter what. But, 10 points after he's been putting up 22 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. He doesn't hit any of those marks today. And it was a poor performance. And the Raptors, sort of fell with him. You had OG as well. He's 3 for 13. He put up 8 points after, last 2 games that were wins. He puts up 24 points and he puts up 26. And it's a sort of a pattern you see with OG as the season has gone on, is that he really, really puts up big numbers in wins. And in losses, he's sort of the OG we're accustomed to. But in these wins, he's 7-13 from 3. He's 3 for 8, 9 of 17 from the field. Just really, really dominant scoring. And you're seeing him every single year. It's very, very linear development, which is something that you don't really see in the NBA. It's very much more of a Scottie development where he, takes 2 years as sort of the same player and then he jumps and all of a sudden he's 22 a game, like I've been saying. But OG's just been adding a little bit of this, a little bit of that every single season, and he's grown to be a pretty impressive player, especially this season. And it's very still early, 8 games through. I think when we've gotten 10, 15, 20 games into the season, we can sort of draw some, actual statistics out of this. But it's been impressive what I've seen so far from OG, and I'm happy to see him continue to develop. It'll be interesting, his contract extensions coming up in talks. We'll see if we will be able to bring him back. But, that's a story for another time. And we also sort of saw, finally, the first good Pascal Siakam won against the Mavericks. 15 of 25. He was getting deep in the post and spinning like he would back in, the championship days. He was getting off screens, getting deep post position. And something that was mentioned that I really, thought was a very good take is that, Scottie and Pascal haven't really had good scoring nights together. You see here Scottie against the Mavericks 2 games ago where they win and take it over as they had. He was 4 for 15, but he impacted the game in so many other ways that it's something you can accept. He had 14 rebounds, 7 assists, 4 steals, 2 blocks, plus 9. 14 points, you're going to take that, especially when he's getting to the free throw line. But today, he didn't have any of that. He didn't have the scoring. He had the same amount, even less scoring, actually. He didn't have the rebounds. He didn't have the assists, not the steals, not the blocks. And I think that's just the step up in competition between the Mavericks and a team like the Celtics, who are a very good defensive team, where the Mavericks are a lot more of a scoring team. And the Raptors' defense, had no answers for the Celtics team and had no answers for Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Even Porzingis as well. Those 3 players themselves combined for about 80 points between the 3 of them, and that was 14 away from what the Raptors had. They dominated just with their star power, and it's the different rankings in the NBA. It's the different tiers, and the Raptors are not in the same tier as the Celtics, and we're not gonna win. We're 4-5 now. The 2 wins earlier in this week are really encouraging, especially the comeback by the Raptors down by like 20 in the fourth. Fight back, claw back behind an amazing, beautiful Scottie Barnes performance. He's hitting threes in spots that you didn't even think he could hit. He wouldn't even dream of hitting to tie it up, and he's bullying guys in the post, and he's facing Victor Wembanyama, a dude double his size, and taking him on and showing him, I've got 3 years experience. I'm going to take this game away from you. You played well. I'm taking this one. OG had a great game. Schroeder had a great game in that one, but it was Scottie Barnes who really set the tone and led this Raptors team to that win, which was, if the Raptors lost that game, it really would have. They're looking at 2-5 instead of 3-4, and it's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different ball game when you're sitting at 2-5 to 3-4, and that allowed us to get a win against a very good Mavericks team so far. And in that win, they turned them to 6-2. The Raptors. That's an impressive win. The Raptors have had some impressive wins, especially, against the Bucks and against the Mavericks here. Spurs are a decent team. And so, going into the Celtics game, you're thinking maybe the Raptors have something about them here. Maybe they can knock one off the Celtics. But the Celtics continue to have the Raptors' number. Podol continues to be less effective than expected. He's fine. He's not as good as he was last season in the second half with Nick Nurse. He's not really getting used. He was really used well with Fred VanVleet, and they had a great two-man game between the two of them. And he just doesn't really have a Fred VanVleet. Schroeder doesn't have that same skill set, that same ability to play off with him. And you see him, sort of falter with that. He only had 3 rebounds today against the Celtics. That's just unacceptable. And he's playing 21 minutes, which is a very small amount of minutes. We're using a lot more small ball, which is interesting because the whole reason we got Podol was to not have to do small ball. But I guess, another reason why we had him was just to have an answer for the guys like Embiid, for the guys like Giannis. But he had a bad game when Raptors played the 76ers. So, and maybe that's why he's not being rewarded with minutes. He had 4 points against the Mavericks. A better game against the Spurs, but he was hyper efficient in that game. Not something that you expect to happen too often. But you get what you get. I don't think he's worth the $20 million contract we paid him. He's not really being that effective, but salaries are going up, and if you're going to have a starting center, you're going to have to pay $20 million for one, and that's what we're doing with Jakob. But he's not a world beater for sure, and that's what happens. So you have players like Schroeder, who's been very, very good this season. Very surprising to see him playing as well as he has. And I would argue he was the second best player today. Maybe even the best. Pascal had the most points, and he had a couple rebounds and some steals, but he had 3 turnovers. He was bad from the field, 0 for 4 from 3, 6 for 17 from field goal. He didn't really, he scored 17 points, but it was very inefficient. And if, we had OG or Scottie, I don't think he's taking as many shots as he did, and I don't think he's scoring as much as he did. And you look at the bench, Chris Boucher, 6 points. Thad Young plays 4 minutes, 4 points. Jalen McDaniels gets in there. Precious gets in there. Malachi, who had actually a pretty decent game off the bench, except when you look at that plus-minus and you see a negative 21 beside it. If you look at his box score, you see 12 points. He was 5 for 7, 2 for 4 from 3. And then you look at everywhere else, and there's a bunch of 1s and 0s. And this isn't binary code. What are we looking at here? And same thing with Grady Dick, a bunch of 1s and 0s, just not really impacting the game outside of those points. And that works at some level, but especially when a team is struggling so poorly for offense like the Raptors were. But as well, they're not winning when they're on the floor. And, you can say that's fine, but if it's a negative 21, you can't do anything with that. So we'll see what happens. Chris Boucher played well, but it was just a bad performance across the board from every single Raptors player tonight. And that those games are going to happen, especially against teams like the Celtics. Those games are going to happen across the season, and you can't be too upset. You're going to lose by 30 some nights, and it's better to get them out of the way, especially against good teams. But they need to bounce back, and this cannot become the norm, especially when they're coming up against a team like the Wizards with their next game on Monday. Very, very winnable game. If the Raptors want to do anything this year, they have to win. And I don't think anybody's expecting them to do anything this year. But if they want to be competitive, if they want to be a play-in team, they gotta beat the Wizards, who are led by Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma. I mean, Kyle Kuzma's being great this season, but I think he's being great because he's on the Wizards. Put him on a different team, I think his stats are looking a lot different. And Jordan Poole is just a train wreck. I wouldn't want him on my team for a bag of chips. He's just, he's not a great defender. He shoots a bunch of threes and, not really efficiently. Doesn't play the basketball the way I would like it to be played. And he's sort of a new age player. You got to be able to beat the Wizards. And the Raptors demolished them in preseason, so I'm expecting that. But, coming off a game like this where the Raptors got trounced, they need to, gather themselves and fight back and beat the Wizards. But I'm not too upset, like I was saying, because they had big wins against the Spurs and big wins against the Mavericks, where, once again, we saw Pascal Siakam emerge again, OG emerge. Schroeder has a back-to-back really impressive games. He's just a great player, great scorer, he does everything. He handles the ball. He's defending at a level I didn't think he was capable of. He had 2 steals and a block in this Mavericks game. I didn't think that was something that Schroeder had in his toolkit. But I think it's something he's added, coming out of these years in LA, and he's sort of realized I got to put some more effort in everywhere I can. And, that's something that he's probably leaned on, especially with Germany and now with the Raptors. And he's played above what we thought he was capable of. You see, Boucher had a great game against the Mavericks. Gary Trent. I want to talk about Gary Trent for a little bit, but before I do that, I'm just going to have a quick break. So I'll be back in a second. And I am back. And I am here now to talk about everybody's favorite Raptor, Gary Trent Jr. And I think he's sort of been lost in the shuffle here. I think that's safe to say, with Darko Rajakovic coming in as the head coach. And I think it's actually something we should have been able to predict. Coming into the season, we knew Darko was going to instill a more passing philosophy for this Raptors team, and we've seen that throughout this season. And one of the players that is sort of a spark plug, and he's not really a passer, he's an ender of possessions, is Gary Trent. And you saw Schroeder get the nod to start at the beginning of the season, and everybody thinks, oh, well, that makes sense. Gary can go and take all his shots on the bench. And first of all, he struggled on the bench last season, and second of all, he's not getting those shots. And you see his defense, which was something that he's really been known for. He was like second in the league in deflections last season or something crazy like that, and now he's fine. And I just really think it's just not a good fit, and I do expect a trade. He's a player in the same mold of Jordan Clarkson, and that just doesn't really fit on a Darko team. Jordan Clarkson doesn't have a role on, because he's not going to pass, and he's going to take a bunch of shots, and not great percentage shots, but he's going to hit a decent percent of very non-percentage shots. And Nick Nurse is sort of a player Nick Nurse is sort of a coach who's going to put in their players who's the best, and he's going to play them, and he's going to let them be them. Darko is more of everybody has to buy into my way of playing, and it's worked to some point. The Raptors are 4-5. I think that's sort of where everybody would expect them to be coming in to this part of the season, but especially with how hard our schedule's been to begin this season, I just don't think Gary Trent really fits with what the Raptors want to do. And it's interesting to see because I think Grady Dick and Gary Trent are sort of in that similar role in their similar blend of player where they're shooters and they're a lot of ball dominant. They're ball dominant shooters, but Grady Dick I think has shown a willingness to pass. You see a couple of nice passes in the Spurs game. With Grady Dick, he had 4 assists and he's moving the ball, and it's something where you can get into the mold of Grady Dick very early, especially because he was just drafted this season, where Gary Trent might just be who he is, especially because we haven't really seen much development coming from him throughout. And so I think we'll be interested to see. I think Otto Porter deserves more minutes on this team. I've been happily surprised with what I've seen from him. I mean, I think we were expecting him to be a real role player for this team last season, and obviously the injury never helps, but he's getting back and he should be getting more and more minutes as the season goes on. I've liked what I've seen from him so far, and he sort of fits what you want. He was a great player on that championship run by the Warriors 2 seasons ago. He was and I think he's still that same player, and I think he'll be able to give quality minutes to this Raptors team, where I looked at the bench and I don't see too many quality minutes. And you see Precious Achiuwa coming back, he's getting more minutes. He had 5 rebounds, 5 assists today, 2 points. I think he played pretty well. And a lot of this bench is uninspiring, so it's great to see that you see a lot of people getting thrown out from the bench. We have a deep bench, just the bench is deep in bad players, sort of, and so it'll be interesting to see who solidifies a role in this team coming forward. And that's just sort of what I wanted to end on. Like I said, I think 2-1 is a great week. You know, you're playing the Spurs, Magic, and Celtics. I think you're expecting 1-2. So going 2-1 is above the expected wins, and it puts this Raptors team now at 4-5, still hanging around. And if they go on a run, they can impress, and they're still within arm's reach, and that's where you want to be. But now I'm going to go quickly just look around the NBA landscape and do a quick talk around that. Then I will look ahead to the week upcoming, and we'll be on our way. So quickly here, we're just going to take a look at the Eastern Conference standings. Just in a sec. I'll be right back. And I am back. So at the top of the Eastern Conference, we have the Philadelphia 76ers, who are 7-1. Nick Nurse has been really, really good for them, as I hate to say that, but he's really spoken to their players, and that was something that was sort of the thinking behind him leaving. It was 10 seasons with the Raptors, associated with the Raptors, and, you know, at a certain point, he's a very demanding coach, and he's going to instill something in you, that he's going to instill a fire, but eventually it's not going to work anymore. And, you know, he's now with Philadelphia, and he's killing it, and I'm happy for him. I don't love the way it ended in Toronto, but I'm happy for him, and 7-1 is a great start, especially with that Philadelphia team who just lost James Harden. And you look down the Celtics, who the Raptors just lost to, another very dominant team, great team, you know, good defense, great offense, just very well-rounded, exactly what you want, stars galore, deep bench. They're going to be wrecking. They're going to be something that is to reckon with, and, you know, they might be my early pick for NBA champions. You know, obviously you can't look past the Nuggets, and I don't think I will, but if I was going to pick somebody to come out the East at this very moment, I think the Celtics would be that selection. The Pacers outpacing a lot of these other teams. They're 6-3. Very, very great performance starting out for them. They've had some very good wins, and it's not really what you would expect. And you look across their lineup, they have a lot of young players, and they're making those leaps, and they're making those jumps, and they're playing together. And it's a proud thing. They've been a really, really great offensive team. They're putting up about 126 points per game, and I think that's going to fall back to earth. Their defenses, you know, you look at the teams around them. The Miami Heat let up 110. Celtics put up 106. Philadelphia let up 107. So letting up 121 and being ahead of some of those teams is really indicative of, you know, that's not really where they're supposed to be, and they're going to fall back down to earth. But it's still very impressive nonetheless, and, you know, we will have to see where they end up. And then you have the 5-4 teams, the Miami Heat, Hawks, Magic and Bucks. The Bucks have been, they're on a 2-game losing streak, and they've been very impressive, with Dame making a huge trade for him. And I think, I said this last week, but they're still trying to figure stuff out. But you can only say that for too long, and I will, they'll pass for this week, and they'll probably pass for next week. But a week after that, if they're still, struggling around 500, there's going to be some alarm bells ringing. And they're not going to be jingle bells. They're going to be alarm bells. But they're good for now. They have to find their feet, find their rhythm. And I'm sure they will. I won't bet against Giannis, who hasn't been, as dominant as he usually is, which is interesting. We'll have to see how that goes, but who knows? Magic, another team similar to the Pacers, where they have a bunch of young players and they're really outplaying how they, usually do. You look at the Hawks and Heat, and those are two play-in teams the last couple seasons. Maybe they'll, finish as 6th or 5th, but that's sort of where they'll be, 10-6. And the Heat, coming off, Eastern Conference Finals appearance, they continue to win these close games, and I really don't know how they do it. I was expecting them to be not good this year, but we'll have to see. They're still, 1 game over 500. A lot of this is guesswork as we go, and the Hawks as well, who just lost today. And once again, I'm not a huge believer in Trae Young. He's one of my least favorite play styles. He's sort of a shooter, takes bad shots. He's a passer, and I do like to see the ball moved a little bit, so I give him credit for that, but he doesn't play defense, and he takes bad shots. But at least he passes. But I'm not a huge fan. But I do like DeJounte Murray, and I know he's had a very solid season coming. And 5-4 is probably a little bit over, but that's how it's gonna go. Some teams are gonna be over, some teams are gonna be under, and that's how it's gonna go. You look at the Knicks; they're 4-4. They're sliding into that 8th spot, that last playoff spot, if there wasn't a play-in tournament, I guess. But they're 4-4. Knicks, they're a little bit older. I would say they're sort of similar to the Raptors in age and Hawks in age compared to the Magic and Pacers, but they're always going to fight hard, and they have some real good talent on their team. They just don't have that top end talent that's going to push them up to that upper echelon of team in the Eastern Conference, and that's probably where they'll be around there. The Cavs 4-5 with the Raptors and Brooklyn Nets. I don't think the Cavs have shown their quality yet. Evan Mobley is solidifying himself into the player that he is as not really a threat offensively. He'll hit a couple of jumpers in it, but he'll mostly stay around the rim. Doesn't really have a handle, not really going to move the ball, but he's a great defender, and he might be an all defense type player, maybe even a defensive player of the year in one day, but not really anything else. And you look at the Raptors, I've already gone deep on them. Not really a good offensive team, but their defense is really strung them together. The Nets, I think they're overperforming, honestly, to be at 4-5. And as you look here, you sort of see the bottom of this Eastern Conference. I won't go too deep on any of these teams. The Pistons, Wizards, exactly where they're supposed to be. Hornets, 3-5, maybe even overperforming, exactly where they're supposed to be, though. And then, the Bulls is a team that I didn't really buy in to this year. It's been 2 straight years of mediocreness, and their team continues to age and age. You haven't seen development from young players, and that's where you're going to end up at the bottom of this team. I would expect some sweeping changes to be coming from Chicago in the very near future as we move to the Western Conference with the Denver Nuggets leading the pack at 8-1. Right behind them is the Dallas Mavericks and Minnesota Timberwolves, both teams who are coming into the season after, for Dallas missing the playoffs and not really changing much. And you look, and that team missed the playoffs and they weren't really good to the end of the season. They've really figured some stuff out. They're 7-2, and their point differential doesn't really speak volumes, but it speaks pretty well. And 7-2 is, it's nothing to scoff at. And then Minnesota as well, Anthony Edwards really playing his way up into that upper echelon where you're going to be able to lead the team by yourself no matter what. And he's just a dog, and he's dominant. I love what I see from him. And as you drop down, you see 2 teams who I've been very high on, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Golden State Warriors, and a team right above them who I wasn't going to be high on, the Houston Rockets at 5-3. They've won 5 in a row after starting out 0-3. Van Vliet has this team playing like dogs. I love what I've seen from them. Great performance. And then you start to move to the disappointment territory. Sacramento Kings 4-4. It's early in the season, not disappointed. Lakers 4-5. A little disappointed. I know they started out slow last year, and this is better than that 2-10 start, but you gotta pick it up at some point. And people were calling this team a finals contender, and 4-5 isn't gonna cut it. But a team that was even more, that has been continuously making changes, is this Phoenix Suns team. They have huge talent. They have talent to be in that upper echelon, yet they still seem to be at 4-5 next to the Lakers and Pelicans, who I think is exactly where they started out very well, but they've fallen back to earth, lost 4 in a row. This is where they're supposed to be, this 500 sort of yo-yo team, and that's what you expect. And another team I'm disappointed in is the LA Clippers, 3-5. They have a plus differential. They had a really great one, but they've lost 4 in a row, and they've lost 3 in a row with James Harden, and it's really not working out, and he's not playing his best basketball, and nobody is, and it's screams, drama island, total drama island, it screams, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, for God's sakes, they're tied with the Trailblazers right now. It's not looking good, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were some unhappy faces as they trade away basically all their draft picks for the next lifetime. And they're only 3-5 to speak for it. But like I said, Trailblazers where they're supposed to be. Grizzlies not really where they're supposed to be. 1-8. Yikes town. They're not good. Jazz 3-7. Spurs 3-6. They've gone on a 4-game losing streak as well. That's where they're supposed to be, and that's going to round out this NBA landscape. And so the last thing I'm going to do is go talk about the upcoming Raptors games, and then I'll have you on your way. So the upcoming Raptors games, of course, as I was talking to you earlier, Monday, November 13th, the Raptors play the Wizards, a game that they should be winning, that they expect to win. Then on Wednesday, they go to the Bucks. They've beaten the Bucks this season. Bucks aren't looking like killers, and that's when you want to play them. We'll see how it goes. And finally, to round it out, they play the Celtics, and that sort of ends the rough patch of NBA teams that they sort of play when they finish. The Bucks and Celtics next week will sort of, maybe we're at 5-7. But you look ahead, we got the Pistons, Magic, Pacers, Bulls, winnable games, and we can go on a little bit of a run there. And if we can steal 2-1, like we stole 2-1 this week, we're looking very, very good. So, fingers crossed. I'll see you guys next Saturday after those 3 games against the Wizards, Bucks, and Celtics. We'll see where we are. We'll look at the NBA landscape. And yeah, thanks for listening. I'm your host as always, Lucky Roberts. You can follow me on Twitter, do what you want. I'm not going to force you to do anything. And thanks for listening. Have a great day.